he is the most underrated forward in the last 10 years, and maybe even in the history of football.
I do actually seem to remember him scoring 4 against Madrid.
I completely disagree.
I could make...
goody, yes. Go on, tell them why you disagree.
I think he's been the Premier League player of the decade.
Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo have been dominant for the last 10 years in terms of goals, accolades, trophies, and arguably 2 of the best players to have ever played the game. But who would you line up alongside them in a world 11? We have assembled a panel to address that very issue. I'll start with you first, Sam. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm not bad.
Great.
Looking good, thank you. So are you. And Pete as well. I love a roll neck, Pete. I love one. How are you doing today?
Good.
Excellent. And Steph?
Hiya, Jay.
All good?
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with you, actually. I imagine it would make sense to start with the goalkeeper. Do you have something to begin this discussion with?
I don't think the goalkeeper is going to be that much of a discussion. I'm going to put a name out there straight away, Manuel Neuer.
You're going to say Manuel Neuer, okay. Do either of you two have anything to say about that?
I wanted to make it a discussion and maybe throw De Gea in there, maybe throw Oblak, but it's not a discussion, it's Neuer for me all day long.
Really? Okay. Well, I mean, to be fair, we know that there's going to be arguments further down the line in other positions, but no other Premier League goalkeepers done enough to get on that list? Check, maybe?
No, absolutely not. I don't think there's been an outstanding world-class goalkeeper in the Premier League over the last 10 years. I think if you're going to look for...
You'd still have De Gea as world-class.
I think if you're going to have alternatives to Manuel Neuer, then you may be looking at Keylor Navas at Real Madrid, who was such a fundamental part of their team when they won those consecutive Champions Leagues. And if you want to look elsewhere, then I think Oblak was the shout.
Yeah.
And maybe Marc-Andre ter Stegen. But since ter Stegen still cannot even displace Manuel Neuer from the German national team, then we have to give it to the guy who won the Champions League 2013, World Cup 2014, revolutionised the position of goalkeeper really under Pep Guardiola. And for me, there's no doubt about it, best goalkeeper of the decade and maybe even the best goalkeeper of all time.
Interesting. Before we go any further, I want to establish criteria for this because arguably David De Gea, in terms of athleticism and presence, could be on the same page as Manuel Neuer in terms of his actual ability, perhaps, in terms of achievements and things like that. Is that where the separation is?
I think there's got to be definitely an element of that. But some players, due to the teams they've played in, haven't won as much as others, but they will still be listed in, I think the best players of this decade. I think De Gea is, in my opinion, still a world-class goalkeeper, and it's between him and Neuer. I think for the last half a decade, maybe bar last season, De Gea was better than Neuer. But it's 10 years, not 5.
Just look at trophies and compare De Gea to Neuer. I think Neuer's got 7 Bundesliga titles. There's a Champions League and there's a World Cup in there. Yeah, but the best players play for the best teams. There's a reason why De Gea plays for Manchester United and not Bayern Munich.
Yeah, but Real were desperate for De Gea, and they have arguably been the most European successful.
But they clearly weren't that desperate to go all the way in and say, okay, this is all we need. They've always said, you know what, Navas will do for now. And in the end, they went for Courtois rather than De Gea. If they really wanted him, they would have gone for him.
But either way, it's a moot discussion, really. Neuer is the best keeper of this decade, isn't he?
Okay, where should we go next? Let's start with left back.
I think we're probably in for a similar group decision here. It's Marcelo for me. I think you've got Alba, you've got Alaba, but it's Marcelo light years ahead of the rest.
Any discussion from that? Anyone else?
Well, I think we can say Alba and Alaba, they're relatively close, and you could say, well, Marcelo was a bit suspect defensively every now and then, but he added so much to the team going forward. He was a key member of the Madrid team that won 4 Champions League over the past decade. So,
could you throw Ashley Cole into the mix?
No, I think his days were done for the bulk of this decade. After Chelsea won the Champions League, I think that was enough for Ashley Cole. Unfortunately, his peak just didn't coincide with this decade. Otherwise, you are talking about a world-class left back there. The only other contenders that I had on my list were Jordi Alba, of course, who played so well for Barcelona throughout the decade, winning a treble as well in 2015, and also Patrice Evra, who might have slipped under the radar a little bit. Maybe some people thought maybe his best days were gone by, but he still managed a couple of titles.
Is that the same thing as Ashley Cole, perhaps? Isn't that the
Maybe,
previous
but
decade?
I think maybe he stayed world class a little bit longer than Cole because he was still playing. He played the Champions League final in 2015. He played in a Euros final in 2016 for France. You know, so even though he was getting on in years, he was still a huge influence in dressing rooms and a world class competitor. So, but for me, I'm happy to go with Marcelo, one of my favorite players of all time. Always there at the clutch moments for Real Madrid.
I'm a little bit upset so far. I was expecting there to be more contention.
It's early.
Exactly. Okay, we'll switch sides. We'll go to right back. Anyone want to throw a name into the mix?
Right, I'll throw out who I think is the outstanding candidate, and I think we may get a uniform opinion here as well. I don't think there's any dispute over Daniel Alves being the best right back over the last 10 years, and possibly the greatest right back of all time. Just that World Cup missing from the record books for him, but for me, Daniel Alves, the most consistent right back of last 10 years and probably of the last 100 years.
Yeah, I think right backs is probably the weakest position out of all of these. Yeah, you know, when you look at the best right back in the Premier League, it's really difficult to find an outstanding candidate. So you've got little to go from, say, even the Premier League to rival Alves, who has been superb.
I think maybe you could look at the other options that I had considered were World Cup winning captain, obviously Philipp Lahm, but he, of course, across the decade he probably played three positions: right back, left back, and defensive midfield as well. And the other name that I had on the list was Daniel Carvajal, who came back after a loan spell at Bayer Leverkusen to Real Madrid and ends up in a fundamental part of their team as well. But I don't think either of those two, I don't think anybody else is in the shake-up the same way that Dani Alves is.
I think for me, Joshua Kimmich is in that, but that's just for the last 5 years. So if we could say, generate Bayern Munich right back, where we could just mold Lahm and Kimmich into one, then it would have been a competition.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an unfortunate thing through this debate. Is there would be some players who have just done 5 years, either at the start or the end of the decade, that when you wrap it up into the whole 10 years compared to some other players, they fall short.
I think if we look in the next decade, it may well be him. But what people remember is the image of players with trophies in their hands. When you try, garner a list of all-time greats, and Kimmich still hasn't got that huge recognisable trophy. I mean, the Bundesliga Shield is a nice trophy, but come on.
So Dani Alves, we all happy with Dani Alves?
Yeah, he's in.
Look at you lot all getting along. Okay, Steph.
I think the defence is one of those areas where you're generally touching on the same names, really. So moving into the centre-back position, which is what you wanted.
Yeah.
I'll go with the obvious one, Sergio Ramos.
Okay.
Spain's most capped player, 4 Champions League trophies, I think 2 La Liga titles,
Always
World Cup winner, European Cup winner, and quite possibly one of the best centre-backs ever.
He's just a winner. That's what always typified me with him. I think he would instantly improve any team. Obviously, with him being the best defender in the world, in my opinion, he would do that anyway. But just the mentality he would bring to the rest of the squad would level teams up 2, 3, 4 levels rather than just getting that one single player. I think he would make everyone better. He knows how to win.
The thing is with Ramos is you look back over those Real Madrid teams, and a lot of people have a difficulty characterising why these Real Madrid teams, particularly under Zinedine Zidane, why were they great? They didn't have a great identifiable style of play the same way that Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team did, for example. They just always seemed to win the Champions League after somewhat of an average campaign. But there's 2 massive reasons why they got those Champions Leagues. It's because of Cristiano Ronaldo at one end and Sergio Ramos at the other. Because when the chips were down and they needed those big moments to nod a ball away to get a block in or even score a goal like he did in the Champions League final against Atletico Madrid, Sergio Ramos is just one of those personalities that always stands up. For me, Sergio Ramos, not only the best defender of the last 10 years, but for me, probably the best defender of all time, as Steph said already.
Agreeing with you.
I think what you see with Ramos is, if you look at the current Liverpool team, where someone like Virgil van Dijk has lifted that defence from bang average, where all of a sudden they all look world class. Sergio Ramos has been doing that for 10 years at Madrid, which is unheard of, really.
I tell you what, though, there's an awful lot of potential names for that other.
There is.
Yeah.
That other partnership with Sergio Ramos there. Going to say a few names: Terry, PK.
I really struggled here, so I'm willing to be influenced by these 2 fine gentlemen.
What we're going to do first then is say no to John Terry.
Yes.
Who
absolutely, no question.
Had his good years earlier in the decade, and just for me, hasn't done enough throughout the decade to even be in contention for this.
That was easy.
For me, I had 5 names on the list for centre-back. Sergio Ramos was one. I'll give you the other 4. The other 4 were Gerard Piqué, Jerome Boateng, Rafael Varane, and finally Virgil van Dijk. So if there's any more defenders, throw them in the mix now. Otherwise, maybe we can discuss which of these 4.
Company?
Again, big trophies.
But then Virgil van Dijk, has he done it across the decade to say Company has say?
Well, no, but we can't punish him for being younger than the rest, can we?
But then
But we are punishing the others for being older than the rest. So Van Dijk's off the table as well.
And we took Kimmich out because he's only done it for 5 years.
Right, take Van Dijk out. I do think that's harsh. I think he deserved a bit more of a...
He's had his mention, which
Do you think he's
which
done
says
enough?
a lot about the level.
Do you think he's done enough yet to be spoken
Well,
about?
he's the peak centre-back in the world right now.
Yeah.
Right, so he's done a year.
That's the thing, he's the best centre-back in the world right now, but he's been at that level for 12,
And
18 months.
Would Liverpool be Liverpool without him? I don't think so. I don't think so.
But like we
Again.
just said, someone like Sergio Ramos has been doing that for 10 years.
Right. Okay.
Has Piqué maybe been doing it for 10 years as well? Has
Probably even longer.
Chiellini been doing it for 10 years?
Yeah.
Bonucci?
2 more names.
Okay. Yeah. The other ones on my list then, like I said, were Rafael Varane, who I think is definitely merits consideration. Not only has he been part of the Champions League winning teams with Real Madrid, but he completed that rare double last year as well, winning the Champions League and the World Cup in the one season.
When we're picking this second centre half, are we looking for what would be the best partnership with Ramos, or are we just wanting to pick the best player here?
Best player.
The best players
It's gotta
can
be
play
best
together.
player.
Yeah, of course.
We can't vouch for how these humans interact, I don't think. I think we've just got to pick it on.
And we know Piqué and Ramos can play together.
So what are
you're
we
saying
saying? It might
Piqué
be Piqué then?
I'd be leaning more towards Varane. I think Piqué has. I've thought he was on the decline for a few years, and then last year he resurged again and was exceptional. And I'm worried that's clouding my vision for thinking he's worthy of being called the best defender.
Yeah.
And whatever, well, look, he's won the titles at international level the same way that Ramos did, and has been as fundamental part of the team for Spain as Ramos was. And also he's got those Champions League titles, including a treble with Barcelona. So I don't think he can be discarded as a candidate so quickly.
I'm happy to go with Varane. I'll be honest, he wasn't top of my list because to me it still feels like Varane's only been around for 2-3 years. Because he just seems so young still, especially compared to the more experienced names we've been discussing.
So the back sorted.
Yeah.
We now move on to the more attacking, creative parts of the formation.
Well, the formation we're playing 4-3-3, aren't we?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to play 4-3-3. That has been the formation of the decade, as it were. There's been variations of that have won certain trophies, but when push comes to shove, I think from the start of the decade, it's been 3 midfielders, 3 attackers. That's the way we think of a team being set up in this decade. So I think we should.
And then your midfielders aren't necessarily right, middle, left. There's 1 destroyer and 2 more creative.
2 more mobile.
Is it a
AS
destroyer
stands.
that you're putting in the middle there?
Well, let's start with him. And I
The
think
destroyer.
this is going to be a popular selection as well. For me, I'll let you two discuss it. I'm just going to put the name out there. It's going to be Sergio Busquets.
It is.
I wasn't
going to be Sergio
expecting you to
Busquets.
say Sergio Busquets.
Why?
Why?
I don't know. I just was
He's
expecting you to say
been
N'Golo Kante.
the best player in his position for the past 10 years. N'Golo Kante is a phenomenal player. Love him.
But we're not finished yet. We're not
Hold
finished
your
yet.
horses, Jack.
And Kante, for me, I think this is his 5th season at the highest level. Again, goes back to the whole debate. It's okay, we want a team of the decade, not a team of the half decade.
But can I say for this position, he's not a defensive midfield player. When he burst in at Leicester, he played in a partnership. Okay, and it was Danny Drinkwater that sat. When he played for Chelsea, he played in a partnership, and it was Cesc Fabregas or Nemanja Matic that sat.
Yep.
Okay, he's not a defensive midfielder at the base of midfield. That's not where he plays. If we're going to put Kante into the team, I think he's going to occupy one of the other slots in midfield.
I agree.
In that regard, there's 2 other players who would have in consideration there. One who had a late career renaissance in Andre Pirlo, and the other one is, of course, we have to come back to that Champions League winning team for Real Madrid. And this man also won the Copa America, finally got his hands on that for Brazil, Casemiro.
Yeah, I think you can call them candidates, but they're not really.
So we're going with Sergio Busquets. Centre mid.
See?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go left now. Go on, Steph.
David Silva. 10 years of excellence at Manchester City, a team that are quite possibly transforming the game. 4 Premier League trophies, won the World Cup with Spain, again the Euros. For me, a player of rare consistency, always delivers, even in difficult times. I mean, we all know about his personal situation. Was that last season or the season before? And you never even saw that on the pitch. So for me, he's a definite.
And for me, somehow, despite being the age he is and as decorated he is with so many trophies, he still gets underrated, David Silva. You know, he's been a key part for club and country over the course of this decade. And, you know, when it comes to that mix of combativeness and creativity and a player of his relative slight stature to come and make an impression like he has over the course of the decade of the Premier League, I think has been nothing short of spectacular. 4 Premier League titles, as Steph said, every other domestic honour in the game, and the one thing really missing from his CV is the Champions League. So let's hope for his sake, before he leaves at the end of this season, that Manchester City can pick one up and give him what he deserves. For me, no doubt about it, David Silva's in this team.
I completely disagree.
Oh, goody, yes. Go on, tell them why you disagree.
I think he's been the Premier League Player of the Decade. I think he's been wonderful in the Premier League, but he's not been the best player, in my opinion, in the world. I think Iniesta would be put ahead of him. I think Iniesta has won everything, obviously, with Spain. He was part of the Barcelona team that has been the team of the team forever. So I think that Barcelona team would destroy the Man City team at the moment. Because they were seemingly untouchable. They brought a whole new style of football into it, and Iniesta was as pivotal to that as Messi and Xavi. So I would have to have Iniesta over David Silva, and he's won the Champions League.
Are we going to say?
I'm not a big fan of Iniesta.
Why?
Interesting.
He scored against the Dutch.
That's obviously that tiny thing, but. For
supposed
me,
to be impartial.
I think they're slightly different players as well, to be honest, Iniesta and Silva, where Iniesta is slightly higher up the pitch. And for me, that's a position where you expect goals and assists. And
he gives neither, really.
I think if we're going to look at Iniesta's goals, you can probably count them on 2 hands here. So
it's a difficult sentence to say, though, that you would put that, just for me to think it out loud, that you'd say David Silva definitely better than Iniesta.
I can't see how you can justify that. If you say exactly as Jay said, if you say that out loud, do you not feel a little silly?
No, I don't.
Not at all.
No.
It's 2-1, but I would like the record to state
that
Iniesta is a far better player than David Silva. And is that the one player you would have in that role?
Yeah, I want him there. Yeah, I want David Silva there.
Over Modric?
Well, we'll come to the other midfielder. Okay, so let's say that Silva's in because he's lost the Iniesta.
So we're going to rest him there for a minute.
How about Toni Cruz?
That's the other midfielder we're coming to. We're coming there.
So are we saying that both those players are on the
We've
right
got
hand
Busquets.
side?
No, hang on.
We're not looking for a right midfielder, as in like an old school David Beckham style player. We're looking for 3 midfielders. We've got 2 of them. We've got Busquets and we've got David Silva.
But you're still saying David Silva, by his inclusion, is better than Modric.
No, they're coming.
Cruz,
They can be in the same
Iniesta.
team. They can come in the
How
same
can
team.
they be in the same team when we've got one midfield spot left?
Right. So the other because we have to talk about who's in the other midfield spot. Okay. So the candidates that I had for there. That's where I had N'Golo Kante as a candidate, is the other midfield position, okay? So
Wow, so you're leaving 4, wow, okay.
So I had N'Golo Kante, Iniesta was on my list as well, Xavi Hernandez, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, and my wildcard entry was James Milner. But he's not going to get picked, but I just wanted to put it out there. That I think James Milner has had a great decade in football. Crowned by the Champions League title last year.
And he's pretty much a neighbour, isn't he?
He's my neighbour as well, yeah.
Okay.
So which one of those?
Well, it's not going to be, we have to pick one of those. So we've got Xavi and Iniesta.
Yeah, we can pick 2 because
Can't
we can
have
leave
your
David
cake and eat
Silva
it
out.
and have Iniesta and Silva if we're gonna say that they're all
Silva's
in the same
a lock
position.
for me. He's a lock.
Yeah, but I'm saying in that case, could you potentially say that Iniesta trumps the rest of the names you just mentioned?
We could potentially say that, but that's not going to happen because we've got someone else for that position.
Yeah, I know who I want in that position.
I feel like there's been some subterfuge and plotting beforehand.
I know who I want in that position, the other position.
Who would you like in that position?
I think the outstanding candidate for that position is Toni Kroos.
Above Luka Modric?
Yes.
Above Kante?
Just about above Kante.
And would you have Silva? Well, obviously you've chosen Silva over Kante. I just can't believe you've made that decision.
But that decision's been made. I think we need to move on and make that final decision.
Yeah, so the final decision.
So
hang on a minute, you mean in terms of who the third
midfielder
midfielder.
Right.
Do we want to go with Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, or if you want Iniesta.
Why would you pick
gonna say
Modric, Cruz over Iniesta?
Okay, because he's been better for a longer time. I think he's younger better for a longer time as well. So he's younger. Probably took Luka Modric a longer time to get to his best level, and he didn't last as long at that level.
Yeah.
Whereas Toni Kroos has been so consistent from the minute that he emerged when he was on loan, I think, at Bayer Leverkusen, and then established himself as a key player at Bayern Munich, winning the Champions League, then winning the World Cup, and then going winning what he's won at Real Madrid. Again, another one of these type of Sergio Ramos characters. What's his motivations when he's won so much? Absolutely phenomenal player.
I agree. I think his motivation seems to be waning at the moment. I think he's potentially on the he's reached the peak of his career. I think he's been better than Modric. I think he's a better player. And I think I'd be if I was allowed to choose, I would be choosing Silva and Iniesta.
So you do want Silva? I think
Iniesta and Cruz.
I'd be having Iniesta and Cruz.
Okay, so Cruz is in the team.
Yeah, because for me it's Cruz, Modric. I could pick both of them. I could pick Cruz today and then tomorrow say no, Modric, because for me they're both at that same level. And like I said, Cruz has that World Cup. Champions League with two teams.
Modric winning the Ballon d'Or last year, I think, was more of a legacy award. I think it was an award because Ronaldo
and
at Real
what
Madrid.
He did in Russia as well, though, maybe.
Ronaldo
taking Croatia as far as he did.
Because Ronaldo at Real Madrid had won so many individual honours, it left no space for anybody else to be rewarded. And you had a player who's consistent as Luka Modric within that team, and he just never had a chance to win an individual trophy.
It was like Ryan Giggs winning the PFA award, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a legacy honour.
So we're saying he's not talking his way into this midfield?
I don't think so.
No.
He spent too long at Spurs.
So we're saying
Busquets. Silva.
No.
Cruz.
Still not happy with the Silva selection.
But we can't all be happy. We need to have.
It's votes. Once it goes 2-1, that's it. I'm sorry.
Jake, just out of interest, what do you think?
Personally, I would say Iniesta.
He doesn't have a vote, though, so
I
I'm
don't
lucky.
have a vote, unfortunately.
And there's a reason why he doesn't have a vote, and that he then still agrees with you should be assigned to you as well, really.
Yeah.
You'll get it back up front, don't worry.
So
sure.
this is. I will make my peace with it. I think if I was picking a team to win, to be a team that I'd put out, I would have Kante in there, just to destroy that midfield and get it into.
But that's for just one game. You want a team that's
But
destroying
I don't think he's
years.
been the best player for the decade. But if any team to go and win that in immediate
I
match,
would,
I'd have him
I
in
would
there.
love N'Golo Kante to have won a Champions League by now, because that would probably separate him from some of the other candidates, or at least put him on par with some of the other candidates for the midfield in this team. I love N'Golo Kante. I think he's brilliant.
He's won everything he can for the last 5 years.
I know, not Champions League though.
No.
Does winning the Premier League with Leicester not kind of count as a Champions League? Is that not
Yeah, it's
on
huge.
a par?
It's huge. And to win the Premier League for two different teams, one season after another, I think is, again, a phenomenal achievement. You know, and when you think about where he came from, okay, so he wins the title at Leicester, wins the title at Chelsea, then goes and wins the World Cup. I mean,
And you just had to see what happened to Leicester
2015, 2016.
the season after they won the league, how dramatic their downturn was. I think a lot of that is down to Kante leaving.
Mm-hmm. But we've only got space for three midfielders. I'm sorry, N'Golo.
Alas. Okay, so sort of happy with our midfield, aren't we?
I think we
We
are.
will tolerate
It's
it.
2-1. It's 2-1. I'm sorry.
Tolerate it.
Okay, so we'll move on to the funnest bit, obviously,
Yeah.
the front three. Where should we start? I mean, to be
Just
fair,
get Messi, Ronaldo out of the way.
Well, that's it. The thing is, there's no disputing that it's Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. And if we're putting them in this formation, I'd like to put Messi sort of from the right, where he likes to come in and do his damage on the left foot. And I'd like to put, what?
Steph's going, if you put Messi on the right, I can't have Robin.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
that's pretty much. It's like, how
I'd
about
like
we
to
move Messi to the middle, and then who's the best right winger of the past decade?
Gareth Bale.
But yeah, let's be honest. Messi on the right, Ronaldo on the left.
Ronaldo on the left. There's just no dispute, and we don't need to sit here and list all their achievements. Okay, this team is Messi, Ronaldo plus another 9.
is there an argument to say that he could be in the centre though, Ronaldo?
No.
But there's an argument for both of them to be in the centre, because they've demonstrated over the last few years how versatile they are. Messi has gone into the centre. He's gone up front. He's gone into number 10. He's gone up front. He's gone right side. He can play anywhere in those attacking positions. He can do damage from anywhere and
Whereas the natural position would have Messi coming in from the right,
Yeah.
Ronaldo coming in from the left,
And
which
then we use
leaves
the
space for a number 9.
which
I'll tell you
we
what.
use as centre forward at that.
That is a contentious one because the names I'm already thinking of: Luis Suarez, Lewandowski. I mean, there's probably
Go on, go
20
on.
more.
Let me give you my contenders for that position, okay?
Right.
First of all, I'll tell you some of the wingers that we discarded because they're just simply not at Messi and Ronaldo's level.
Okay.
On my list, I had Arjen Robben, I had Thomas Muller, Neymar, Mohamed Salah, and Kylian Mbappe. Now, again, maybe in the
Hazard
next...
as well.
It's not one out of significance for me. Maybe in the next few years, we might see these players emerge and find their way onto a list for the next decade. But right now...
Mbappe's going to be there for the next decade.
Exactly. They're just not going to displace Messi and Ronaldo right now.
We knew that before we started, that was going to be the case, didn't we? Okay, so...
Right, the strikers.
The strikers.
This is really fun. Okay, so you did mention Luis Suarez and Robert Lewandowski. We'll come on to the case for that because I think there's one of those two that will probably end up in the team thanks to these two. The other candidates that I had in that position were Sergio Aguero,
Yes,
Edinson
definitely.
Cavani,
Definitely not.
David Villa, Antoine Griezmann, and this is my selection for this position in the team.
This is the one you're choosing.
This is the one I'd like to choose. I know I'm going to get outvoted there.
Are you still building up to it?
Yeah.
I
So
can hear
it's
the
none
drum
of the
roll.
ones we've already listed.
Mario Mandzukic.
Why?
Hear me out.
We're waiting. We're waiting.
Hang on,
Okay.
I'm just going to get onto the edge of my seat for this one.
Okay. First of all, he's won the Champions League, okay? So that buys him the license to get into this team in the first place. Wins it with Bayern in 2013. Then he goes and excels at Juventus after that. Reaches the Champions League final with them. Wins titles in Italy.
Does he
then,
excel though?
Then he carries Croatia to the Champions League final thanks to his goals against England in the World Cup.
Was he doing that
We're
on his
talking
own,
about
though?
Modric again.
In the World Cup semi-final.
But
For
was he
me-
doing that on his own? It
For
wasn't
me,
really just
he
him.
is the most underrated forward in the last 10 years and maybe even the history of football. Mario Mandzukic has my vote as centre forward in the team of the decade.
You're picking your centre forward, who's I think for like the last 4 or 5 years he's not scored more than 14 goals.
And this isn't the underrated 11. This is the best 11.
I know, and I would have him there.
You would have him above all those other names, above Aguero,
Okay,
Suarez.
so now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about
Right.
I know he's not getting in, so now let them reach their conclusion.
Should we have a grown-up conversation now?
I'm just going to say Lewandowski, 300 plus goals at club level over the past decade.
No Champions League. Out of the group stage of all the international tournaments he's been to.
So who does that leave then? If we're saying that
No,
the
let me
Champions
talk
League
about
is a
Lewandowski.
prerequisite?
I'm saying he's a really good striker in the Bundesliga the same way somebody like Roy Mackay was. But when it comes to winning things of significance, he's not been there at the big moments. He's just not been there.
I think when you compare him to Aguero, Aguero has been probably the best striker in the Premier League for this decade. But he's not scored the amount of goals that Lewandowski has. He's
not got his hands on the big cups either.
He's certainly not, and he has been playing in a more competitive league, so I can almost forgive him the goals because, you know, Lewandowski plunders 8 against Mainz or something, then fine. But Lewandowski's just got something extra. It's especially if we've got 2 wide forwards coming in. He's got the strength, he's got the aerial ability, he's got the skill that he still can show, and he's got a ruthless finishing ability. You know, is it 5 goals, 9 minutes?
Wolfsburg.
Yeah, that's better than Solskjaer. That's what kind of finisher he was.
Yeah.
Even though they're just the type of goals you've told us to disregard. Scoring 8 against.
Well, not if your
But I
team
think
is a goal down when you come on and you score 5 in 9 minutes.
That's pretty good.
That's
Yeah.
called
then
making
it's
a
a
difference, a game changer of a player. I think Suarez is absolutely merits being part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Copa America as well at the start of the decade with Uruguay, which is not an easy thing to do with a population that small when you've got Brazil and Argentina on your
population
doorstep.
of 3 mil?
3 odd mil.
That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Fellow Uruguayan Griezmann also on the list.
But I found Suarez moving to Barcelona. He scored 50 goals, over 50 goals in one season, but he can't be anything but a complementary player to Messi playing for Barcelona as an attacker. So he did well, but he wasn't great. And I think for me it's Lewandowski. I think you can put him in any team and he will score. So yeah, it's big Louis for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like we said, Aguero's up there, Suarez is up there. But if you can choose between those 3 and think which one of those 3 is going to contribute the most to the team, it's Lewandowski. And on top of that, you get the goals because he's guaranteed 30 goals a season in all competitions.
Yeah, and so if Messi's having an off day and Ronaldo's having an off day, I think you can count on Lewandowski to at least bag you a couple. Why did you even consider Griezmann?
Well, I considered Griezmann because he's been part of great teams. And I think he again, at times, he's been a clutch player, especially for France in the World Cup last year. Just when the time came to score free kicks or penalties or just pop up, I think he had an uncanny ability to do that.
So if football developed to having a special teams player, you think he'd
maybe somebody like Griezmann would be there. But also what's impressed me with Griezmann is the fact that he's shown for so long under Diego Simeone, because he doesn't seem to me, on first glance, to be a Simeone-style player.
Disciplined.
Yeah, he's got that. He's got that X factor Griezmann has, and I think his career is still building. I think it's building towards a Champions League win.
I will, whether it's the following decade that comes or this one, Antoine Griezmann is no way near either of them. I just don't think he's got the calibre to be classed as one of the best in the world.
I think they're all valid points that you just made, but when you are saying that you've only got one spot left, it can't be him.
No, you can't. That's why I would go for Mandzukic.
Yeah. Of course you would. Of course you would. But I don't think either of you two are going to go for Mandzukic. Or has he
it's
swayed
nothing
you?
against
Has he
Robert
swayed you?
Lewandowski.
I could make 3 more teams and Mandzukic wouldn't be anywhere near.
I mean, I think Robert Lewandowski right now is the best number 9 in world football, and I think he's taken his game to a new level. He's not just a finisher. I think he can link. The way he can orchestrate a front line the same way somebody like Sergio Ramos can orchestrate a back line. It's a phenomenal thing to watch when you see him in the stadium. He's an excellent player. But I think at clutch moments as well, you know, like Cristiano Ronaldo was putting hat-tricks past Bayern Munich in the Champions League, you wonder, hey, where's Lewandowski in games like this?
I do actually seem to remember him scoring 4 against Madrid with Dortmund.
And what did Dortmund do in the final?
What
did Lewandowski do in the final?
Well, we were talking about, I can't remember Lewandowski doing what Ronaldo did.
We're not talking
scoring
about
hat-tricks in the Champions League, and
yeah, but Ronaldo's
surely
also
4
won the final.
counts as a hat-trick plus 1.
You have to do it in the finals as well. That's what people remember. And when people remember Robert Lewandowski in the future, they'll probably think of, he was a really good striker in the Bundesliga. But where was he?
Who
Where's he
also
been?
scored 4 against Madrid? That's one they'll remember.
But if we're judging it by that criteria, considering that our last 2 candidates here, Aguero and Lewandowski, neither of whom have done it in finals on the Champions League level. So
that's why I want
what are we
Mandzukic
saying?
in the team.
Are you honestly saying that you take Mandzukic above Lewandowski?
Yeah. In a team of the decade, yeah.
You had
right
a little
now,
smirk on your face then.
If you're giving me a blank check right now and saying, do you want to sign Lewandowski or Mandzukic? I would say, of course, I'm signing Lewandowski. But Mandzukic's body of work and big moments over the last decade stands up. It stands up.
I don't see either of you two agreeing with him.
I'm not sold on the Mandzukic story.
No. So it sounds like you guys have talked yourselves around to Lewandowski.
Yeah.
And Aguero hasn't been mentioned for about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that it? Do we have a team?
I think
Do we
we're
have an
there.
We
11?
have a team.
Okay, let's quickly recap. So we had Neuer in goal,
Yes.
Dani Alves right back, Sergio Ramos, Varane, left back was
Marcelo.
In the middle, this is where it started to get really hairy, we had David
Busquets,
Silva,
yeah.
your boy. We had Biscuits in the middle, and on the right,
Toni Cruz.
And then up front, Ronaldo and Messi, obviously, and
Lewandowski.
and not Mandzukic.
Not Mandzukic.
So there we go. We have our 11. What do you think? Do you agree? Disagree? Some names that should have been there that weren't there? Some that should have been given more time to discuss? Let us know. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye.